The youngest genius to ever extract millions of dollars from frozen soil, Parker Schnabel, the face of the gold rush, is no longer operating an excavator. Behind sealed doors is where he is. Following a devastating decision in one of the most startling environmental cases in mining history, Schnabel's gold business has been put on hold, and he has been sentenced to life in jail without the possibility of release or appeal. This is the same Parker who launched a mining company using money from his undergraduate education, who transformed dirt into television gold, and made $24 million in season 14 alone, and who mined more than $13 million worth of gold by the age of 24. His $16 million from this year, however, is now frozen. Fans are left with one unanswered issue while his Dominion Creek allegations are being investigated. How did the hardest-working, most disciplined miner in TV history go from legendary to imprisoned? Pressure is nothing new to Parker Schnabel. Since he was a teenager, he has participated in the gold game. He had already extracted more than $13 million worth of gold from the earth by the age of 24. His team earned $24 million in season 14 alone. And he ought to be sitting nice now that season 15 has arrived and the price of gold is higher than ever. Instead, he's on the verge of a breakdown, a financial catastrophe, and now something far more sinister. Because Parker takes a single choice that alters everything, halfway between chasing ounces and pursuing legacy. At that point, the narrative abruptly shifts into a courtroom. Parker was focused on one figure going into this season: 10,000 ounces. That was the objective. That's over $26 million at today's gold prices. It's enormous. Hard labor alone, however, was not enough to bring him there. He required no delays, significant volume, and serious compensation. At that point, he made a move that caused others to raise their eyebrows and then raise worries. He spent $2.5 million to purchase Gold Run and Sulphur Creek, two enormous claims. These were historic, not merely patches of dirt. Some of the Klondike's wealthiest locations, which have yielded $1.5 billion in gold over the past century. However, they were also dangerous because of the exposed ground, rocky terrain, and unidentified risks. Parker didn't think twice. He desired to have a chance at greatness. Additionally, he was prepared to put everything on the table. Parker had to relocate Bob, his largest wash plant, from Ken and Stewart's claim to Sulphur Creek in order for the new claims to be successful. It was the longest trip he had ever tried, 25 miles. He only allowed his staff 10 hours to complete the task. That's crazy, not just tight, but just barely. They succeeded. After Tyson Lee pushed the logistics and mechanics rush to patch broken components, Bob was finally operational. Things appeared to be going well for a while. Excellent. Bob got 290.05 ounces, worth $766,000 in 4 days. When Roxanne added an additional 276.01 ounces at elbow cut, Parker's crew surpassed the 6,000 ounce threshold. $16 million is recorded. In an instant, the risk appeared wise. But time was running out behind the scenes. Problems arose at Dominion Creek and Bridge Cut the further they dug. After 12 seasons and more than $53 million in gold, Parker's mainstay wash facility, Big Red, failed. The entire procedure was stopped when the tension bars broke. Over the years, that facility has imported 34,300 ounces. And it was gone now. When just Roxanne and Bob were jogging, Parker's margin of error vanished. Everything had to work out for him, but it didn't. The legal issues that were already developing were not shown on television. Parker made quick agreements in his haste to bolster his claims and squeeze every last dropout before winter. Under a private transaction that omitted the environmental review process, he acquired adjacent claims. And inquiries began as soon as his team started construction at Sulphur Creek. Concerns over ancient gasoline tanks buried on the land, permits, and the disruption of a protected watercourse. Queries for which there were no clear answers. Red flags were present, but you most likely missed the earliest indications, such as a delayed inspection and a subdued visit from government representatives. Those warning signs became clearer as Parker pushed harder, conducting activities around the clock and transporting hundreds of yards of gravel into restricted zones. Then the actual bombshell was dropped. Parker was charged at the federal level with deliberate environmental infractions, not minor ones. Large-scale ones, unlawful dredging, interference with federally protected waterways, and careless trash disposal are all related to that $2.5 million property transaction. Prosecutors also discovered missing paperwork, permission overrides, and worst of all, falsified inspection reports that subcontractors purportedly signed under Parker's supervision. The focus of the broadcast abruptly shifted from ounces to evidence. In order to reach his 10,000-ounce target, prosecutors said that Parker purposefully overreached his business, took shortcuts, disregarded warnings, and endangered public safety and the environment. The figures were terrible in court. More than $3.1 million in unapproved site modifications, 68 recorded infractions, polluted soil near equipment zones, and more than 8,000 gallons of missing hydraulic fluid. The emergency brake was attempted by Parker's defense unit. They maintained that there was no intention to violate the law, that subcontractors had sinned, that missing licenses were only procedural delays, and that everything was an error. However, things became chaotic when the emails were brought up in court. Parker pushed for constant productivity and instructed his players to disregard agent intervention in one thread from early in the season. Not merely eyebrows were raised by the message, it kept showing up repeatedly, and the courtroom became quieter each time. The case then changed. According to a former crew member, who departed midway through the season, Parker was an expert at what he was doing, said he had received several warnings on the possible infractions and the insufficient papers, that he proceeded nevertheless. All of a sudden, the issue was not one of blame. A leader under duress was the subject of a full-fledged spotlight, making every effort to reach the 10,000-ounce target. The repercussions were severe: pay dirt, environmental malfeasance, site damage, fabricated inspection reports, and careless excavation on government property were among the several allegations. There was more than one error. There was a pattern. Prosecutors referred to this type of behavior as deliberate disregard for regulation. The situation escalated from serious to career-ending when obstruction was added to the list. The court did not mince words. Parker's activities were found to have caused the greatest amount of environmental harm, which led to sentence parameters that astounded everyone in attendance. Here's the twist though. The sentence itself didn't describe the complete tale, even if the headlines cried scandal. The word prison was never used in public. There was no televised walk of shame or dramatic mugshot. Rather, Parker quietly and covertly disappeared from the public eye. There were rumors. He was allegedly discussing reparations. No one had answers, but others said he was in protective care, and nothing was more audible than that quiet. This was Parker Schnabel, the golden boy of the Discovery Channel. By the time he was 24, the young man who began mining as a youngster had extracted almost $13 million in gold. He oversaw 8 spin-offs, such as Parker's Trail and Gold Rush. He earned $24 million in just season 14. And nothing now, not a single word. The peculiar aspect: Parker wasn't a showy person. He never led a glamorous life. He didn't possess fancy vehicles or homes. He even acknowledged sleeping on a friend's couch in Los Angeles during the height of his fame. His money was not wasted on status symbols. Rather, he used money for Vegas vacations, World Series tickets, hunting weekends with his group, and travels with his father. The money was never the main focus. It has to do with experience and devotion. His roots were the source of his worldview. His great-grandfather made a living in the wilderness of Alaska. In 1937, his grandmother joined him. Every morning at 4:30, his father still gets up to go to work. Parker was surrounded as a child by individuals who never gave up, who persevered through hardship, and who never gave up. He was molded by that. And that's why it hurt so much to see him fail. He once worked next to his grandfather for a whole summer, eating supper with him every night, listening to intergenerational tales. More to him than any gold bar was that recollection, the one he claims he wishes he had captured. Money fades, and Parker always knew that. It was legacy that counted. That legacy is now under jeopardy. His breakthrough year, the season in which he surpassed 10,000 ounces and completely destroyed the competition, was intended to be season 15. Rather, the season is being referred to be cursed. permit nightmares, equipment failures, and consecutive legal threats. Everything was against him. Parker made an effort to remain focused in order to work harder, quicker, and smarter, but it wasn't enough. Something broke when the pressure reached a breaking point. No one can predict what will happen next. Legal reviews have used up $16 million of his earnings this season. The claims have been put on hold. The crew dispersed. Others are remaining silent. Others are attempting to maintain order, but everything feels different without Parker at the core. Parker's largest wager to date was on Dominion Creek. He purchased the land altogether rather than leasing it as he had done in the past. That meant there would be no royalties or monthly costs. However, it also meant that he was at full danger. He signed a check for $15 million up front with no returns. And it was only the beginning. At Dominion, the gold wasn't just sitting on the surface. The depth of its burial was almost 40 feet. Millions more would be spent on labor, fuel, equipment, and time to get there. It appeared to be a brilliant move based on the stats. An estimated 80,000 ounces of gold are in Dominion's possession. Roughly $2,000 per ounce at current market pricing means that $160 million is languishing in the ground. Parker regarded it as a future rather than just a mining. He would reach his goal if he could draw 10,000 ounces year over 6 seasons. That was the objective. The blueprint was that. There was a catch though. His water licenses and permits were up in 6 years. There are no assurances beyond that. Everything that was left in the ground would be completely lost if the license wasn't renewed by the authorities. Parker then took his usual action. He threw himself into it. Millions of tons of soil were moved by his workforce. 25 million bank yards over the claim's duration. That equates to more than 4 million yards annually. Additionally, that substance grows when you move it, making it more like to 30 million yards. Not only is that type of effort draining, but it's devastating. Schedules lapse, staff deteriorate, and equipment breaks. The pressure affects everyone, not simply one individual. You sensed it everywhere. Because this wasn't a lease, Tyson Lee, Mitch Blaschke, and the rest of the group were under pressure every week. No safety netting were in place. Every delay cost money. Parker would lose every dollar for every ounce they were unable to retrieve. Parker also had no intention of failing. After that check, no, not on that schedule. Not when he had to keep ahead of the pace for the entire operation to function. 10,000 ounces annually, without fail. Let's go back a bit now. Parker didn't play it safe to get here. He demonstrated that he was different from the minute he entered the spotlight on Gold Rush, Alaska in 2010. Parker concentrated on the ground, strategy and crew while other miners purchased trucks and toys. He earned $13 million in gold at the age of 24. His earnings reached $24 million by season 14, and the show followed him to Guyana, Oregon, Colorado, and the Klondike. Above all, he was a warrior, a planner, and a workhorse. But something changed in season 15. Both Dominion and the pressure changed the game. Parker acknowledged that the expense was not the true source of worry. He was downsizing, losing his workforce, and laying off those who had been with him from the beginning. Losing money is preferable to losing them. And he decided to get huge for precisely that reason. Not turn, not shrink, nor bail. He purchased additional acreage. He increased operations. He even secured exclusive rights to mine a 12-kilometer section of Australia Creek through a royalty agreement with Metallic Minerals. A minimum yearly commitment of $1 million in royalties on each ounce extracted were part of that arrangement alone. He now had to oversee not just Dominion but also a whole secondary site that was owned by Little Flake Mining. The scale expanded at that rate. And that's why the crew chemistry was so important. Parker himself stated that people who couldn't manage pressure were the last thing he wanted around him. Someone was out if they couldn't keep up. No second chances, no excuses. And the stakes were larger than ever, with a long-term potential of $200 million. However, things weren't always easy. Because there was less opportunity for mistake the larger the procedure. It mounted up every broken wash plant, every weather delay, every ounce below quota. The strain began to seep into relationships at that point. That season, Parker didn't see a lot of Rick Ness. The two hardly saw each other. Actually, Parker only had 2 face-to-face encounters with Rick over the summer. They got into a heated argument on TV about a difficult circumstance Rick was going through. Other than that though, they ran in different lanes. Tony Beats is no different. Tony and Parker argued endlessly about everything years ago: royalties, ground and permits. However, they avoided each other this time. In between acts, a couple amiable mugs of coffee. Not much more. Because Parker was no longer in debt to Tony. He was his own man. He had his licenses. He was not collecting royalties. And that meant less connection. But also fewer arguments. And there was a price for that breakup. There wasn't much outside assistance as Dominion's tension began to grow. Parker struggled to keep up. Head down, locked in. He continued to fulfill his public pledges at the same time. He signed a significant contract with Metallic. He kept working on a drill program with 400 holes. 2 years before his operations were criticized by the courts. He even received the Yukon government's Robert E. Leckie Award for Environmental Stewardship in 2022. In the mining industry, things may change that quickly. You're being probed one season and getting prizes the next. Outside of work, Parker continued to be the same: quiet, roving and grounded. He didn't party in private planes or live in mansions. He remained on sofas. Another week in Mexico, after a week in LA. The Bahamas sometimes. When they don't break down, he spends the winters riding snowbikes and kiteboarding snowmobiles. He's not ostentatious. He is just wired to push and move. Perhaps that is a contributing factor to the issue, because Parker was out there reinvesting it, taking risks and doubling down on fresh territory, while everyone else was wondering how a 20-something could make $13 million by the age of 24, and 40 feet underground at Dominion Creek, not in some high-rise boardroom, where a season might be ruined by a single poor call. Parker is expected to be worth about $8 million by 2024. Others increased it to about $10 million. In any case, it wasn't what most people anticipated, from a man who has starred in a highly regarded Discovery Channel series for more than 10 years. He doesn't wear timepieces that are more expensive than cars. Rare automobiles are not something he collects. According to most sources, he doesn't even own a home, with the exception of the small one in Haines, Alaska. Built in 2015, this 2,000 square foot home with a wood frame and metal roof is situated on private property near a peaceful lake, and isn't exactly Hollywood. What's more startling about it? Rumor had it that he had purchased a home for $950,000. Parker categorically disputed it, claimed to be homeless, and stated that he would rather sleep on friends' sofas. That wouldn't be credible for most people, but it makes sense for Parker. This is the same individual who gambled on himself with all of his college funds. He was deciding between purchasing permits and selecting rock formations while most youngsters were picking their dorm rooms. Did you wager $17 million on Dominion Creek? Wasn't his initial one. Simply put, it was the riskiest, loudest and most visible. It was not easy gold on the dirt. It was 40 feet below the surface in frozen ground. To make it work, he would have to move 30 million bank yards of earth over a period of 6 years. That's more than 5 million yards annually, consistently, not only on the devices, but also on the operators. It was no tiny mine, Dominion. It was a beast that was ravenous for gold. The only one who was prepared to tame it was Parker. He didn't slow down even as gold prices reached all-time highs. He added additional equipment, recruited a larger workforce, and made the most of everything. In order to mine Australia Creek, he inked royalty agreements with Metallic Minerals, committing to a $1 million yearly work commitment and paying advance royalties. In addition to mining gold, he was constructing an empire, and his efforts continued beyond Yukon, Guyana, Papua New Guinea, Alaska, Australia, Brazil. The Klondike, the jungle, glaciers, and rainforests were all places he visited. Parker was halfway across the world photographing Parker's Trail, unearthing gold where few would venture, while other teams were packing up for the winter, overcoming mosquitoes, mudslides, altitude sickness, and everything else that stood in his way of another reward, while managing logistics in languages he didn't understand. At 16,000 feet in the Andes, he once became unwell. He was knocked flat by altitude sickness, yet he persisted, and the camera continued to roll throughout it all. The $25,000 per episode pay quickly piled up to Gold Rush, Parker's Trail, streaming rights, merchandise agreements, and sponsorships. According to some sources, his yearly income, including mining revenues, TV payouts, and licensing, exceeds $4 million. His team, they personally make between $10,000 and $25,000 every episode. It's a profitable machine. Here's the twist though, Parker never pursued the money, despite the millions, the programs, and the whole mining community watching. Not at all. He was attempting to live up to his grandfather's expectations, and pursuing a legacy, attempting to defend his crew, and demonstrate that a person from a small Alaskan town could successfully compete in the most cruel industry in the world. This isn't a famous person embroiled in a scandal, which is why this moment is more impactful than anyone anticipated. With a backhoe and a group of devoted workers, Parker Schnabel, the kid who grew up in mud, built an empire and never gave up. Fans are shaken to see everything put on hold, even for a short time. Miners, investors, everyone. This season, his $16 million haul was frozen. His Dominion claims are being reviewed by the legal system. Quietly, his royalty sites. His future, uncertain. Additionally, everyone is aware of the elephant in the room. As Discovery continues to broadcast season 15 episodes, everyone feels it, even though no one is expressing it. So, the question is, does Parker return more powerful than before, or does a golden run come to an end with this chapter?